All right, episode 6. We're underway. It is the False Nine podcast. Two weird blokes across two different time zones talking about football. What more do you want to start your morning off? Luke Jobson, John O'Phoebe. Jono, how are you, mate?
Yeah, good. A fun week in football.
I think that's a fun week in football. That's one way to put it. Before we kick it off, I'm going to give you a little bit of breaking news for you to digest. Perth Glory, which is now Daniel Sturridge's team, have essentially been kicked out of WA because the Premier, Mark McGowan, will not be allowing, what's the best way to say it, travellers into the state for at least another month.
Right, okay.
So Perth Glory will not be playing a home game for at least, we'll say 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Because their opening day was Feb 5. It's now been pushed back at least a month. We'll go into postponements later on in the show when we talk about the Premier League. But, I mean, your initial reaction, what do you think the backlash would be like if the Mayor of London was like, you know what, London shut down, no Premier League football games for the next month?
Well, that was talked about, actually. The Premier League talked about having maybe 2 weeks where they just stopped playing over Christmas. And I suspect it was the interest of broadcasters that kind of meant that didn't happen because there's a lot of money in the Christmas period here. So I think at the minute, everyone would probably just about accept it. There's been a lot of this, and I suppose it's just where we are now. The problem comes, as we'll talk about later with the Premier League, is that if you get postponements in some places and then you don't get them in other ones, then you get fixture pile-ups, you get situations where maybe some teams are getting a crowd and some of them are not, so they're getting an unfair advantage. And to a degree, it's just where we are now. I mean, I suppose it's not that surprising. I mean, the Perth didn't get an Ashes test this year, which I don't think that's ever happened before on an Ashes tour. That they don't go to the WACA, they went to Hobart, I think, instead. So, yeah, not surprising. It's disappointing, but there's not that much we can do about it, unfortunately.
No, definitely not. We won't talk about the Ashes, mate. So I'm sure it's a bit of a sore point.
It's finally over. I don't have to care anymore.
4-0.
Yeah, I was actually quite pleased when they collapsed in the 5th test because I thought because it looked like at one point they would actually do it because it was the opening pair went for 70. I thought this isn't impossible. I thought, well, if that happens, then it's going to be we've learned lessons, everything's fine now, and that it's like now we've lost. Let's just have a disaster and sack some people and try fix the problem rather than just say we've learned lessons and that's it. I mean, I did see the video. Weird video of some of the players. I think it wasn't it Joe Root, Nathan from both teams having just a drink at the end of the last test match, and the police turned up. I was like, what?
Yeah,
Root Anderson in close contact for how many days, and now it's not okay. That's struck me as weird.
Well, it wasn't the fact that it was not okay in the sense that they were all together. That was all fine. Root Anderson, Head, Alex Carey, and Nathan Lyon. There were noise complaints, apparently.
Yeah.
The establishment wanted to shut down about an hour and a half ago. They hadn't left. They called the cops. Cops were like, yep, all right, time to go. They left. And Graham Thorpe, the assistant coach, leaked the video. My sources are saying he's out of a job by the end of the week.
Yeah, probably so.
He's also under investigation for smoking cigars in his hotel room.
Okay.
But
he really just decided, I don't want to be part of this anymore. Get another coach.
I don't blame him. But we're not here to talk about cricket. I'm sure we can say that for another day. We'll skirt on to the first proper topic, and it's what and who is next for an Everton side that should not be where they are at the moment. I think they're 16th on the ladder. They're 7 points out of the relegation zone, which is wild to think. You don't think of relegation when it comes to Everton. They've sacked Rafa Benitez after losing 3-1 to Norwich, which, I mean, that in itself is a very sackable offence.
Yeah.
Their one win, I think, in the last 9 games. It's not pretty. They've appointed Duncan Ferguson as a caretaker coach. You've got the likes of Wayne Rooney and Frank Lampard, apparently, that'll be interviewing for the full-time job alongside Ferguson. Tim Cahill has had his name thrown in the ring as well, who's currently coaching their under-18s.
Yeah.
I mean, you got some pretty solid, just, I guess, homegrown boys, you'd almost say, that are going for that job. But you've got to look at the here and now, and it's not looking pretty, even though they do have someone who lives and breathes Everton now in that head coach role.
Yeah, it's a shambles at Everton. I mean, that gets, your expression gets overused in football, but this really is. I mean, they brought Benitez in that was never going to be accepted. I don't understand why he didn't see that, given that he lives on Merseyside and he's spent so many years there at Liverpool. As soon as things started to go wrong, the fans turned. And they've allowed him to really rip up the club. I mean, they got rid of the entire recruitment department, apparently. They've only got one scout left. Loads of other backroom people left. And now Rafa's gone. Where to go now? I mean, what sums it up is Lucas Digne, the left back, fell out with Benitez, was sold. They bought a replacement, and then by the end of that week, they sacked Benitez anyway. And it's like, well, you got rid of your best player for a manager that you obviously were thinking of getting rid of. And it's just it makes no sense. I mean, it's not all Rafa's fault. I mean, they've had a lot of injuries to key players. They didn't spend a lot in the summer either because of FFP. But there again, he didn't have to get rid of James Rodriguez. He didn't have to get rid of Digne. He didn't have to just be so outspoken. He's always very political, and I never thought that mixed well with going to Everton, who he called a small club. I mean, I don't think they'll go down. I think they've got enough, even now, probably 35, 36 points will be enough. They should get that. That some of the players are coming back. I mean, Richarlison's back now, Calvert-Lewin's back, so that's positive. And the fact that he's not there anymore means that the crowd will actually be on the team side at Goodison Park, and it's Steven Gerrard turning up with Aston Villa this Saturday, so that should really get everyone singing from the same hymn sheet at Everton.
I mean, that'll be an interesting one as well, because that's where Lucas Digne went, didn't he?
Yeah, so he's coming back very quickly. And what a mess. And I just think with them, kind of, since Mashiri took over, they've been through what, I think it started with Martinez, who's been rumoured to be someone they were looking at again. Koeman, Allardyce, Ancelotti, Marco Silva before that, and Rafa, and that's a pretty varied group of managers. There's not really a pattern there or a plan. It just seems, let's try and find the biggest name that we can and hope they can install a philosophy and a blueprint and a plan for how we go. And it always feels you should do that and then get a manager who fits it, not the other way around. And Everton have got a lot of problems, and I think keeping Big Dunk around at least till the end of the season to get a plan, get some recruitment people in, build something for the new manager to take over, because Rooney's doing a good job, and we've mentioned him quite a few times going to Everton as manager, but it's not enough that he's a decent young manager with some promise, and he's someone that Everton fans will get along with. That isn't enough. They've got to sort some of these other problems out before going to him. And I'd leave it till the end of the season and just try and get through this season without getting relegated.
Let's assume that they leave Duncan in charge, runs it through the rest of the season, gets him up. We'll give him some credit. We'll say 10th. It's probably realistic.
I think he'll be bottom half, but I think they'll be, as long as they're comfortably away from the bottom four. I think everyone will be happy with that for now.
Who do you bring in? Do you look at Duncan Ferguson as your first team coach and bring Cahill up as a lead assistant? Do you look to Rooney, who finished his Premier League career at least with Everton, has that link? Do the same thing, have Duncan there as that lead assistant. They potentially work in tandem. Do you go with a Lampard? Do you go with Cahill, who's doing the academy stuff, or do you go for, I wouldn't call it tried and tested, but the Everton way at the moment of finding the biggest name on the market?
If it was me, I'd get to the end of the season and I'd just go for someone who knows how to build a club. Maybe that means somebody older, maybe with the idea that someone like Cahill or Ferguson or maybe even Rooney could come in a year or two, in a couple of years, with something in place that they can build on. So I'd be looking at someone like Lucien Favre, the former Dortmund manager. I know that's not a name that they've considered, but he plays attacking, fast football, which is what Everton like. He probably would be happy to stay for a couple of years and just see this through. I think Rudy Garcia is the one name they've been linked with, who managed Lyon, who would be good for that because he's experienced. He's never managed in England, but he plays the right kind of football. He knows how to build a club. Maybe someone like that for 2 years, and then maybe with Cahill as number 2 or Ferguson, and then maybe they take over. That's what I would do. What they will do is appoint Rooney or Lampard.
Yeah. I think the worry is they're going to look to Rooney and they're going to see what he's done with Derby, which, mind you, if he somehow manages, because I think they're off the bottom of the ladder now.
Yeah, they are.
Which is insane considering where they were, minus 21 start of the year. My worry is that is a very, very big jump from championship level football to the Premier League.
Yeah.
And we've seen that before with both Lampard and Gerrard.
Yeah. We saw it you look at people like Daniel Farke, who took Norwich up twice. There's a lot of those sort of managers who it is a big leap, and it's a different set of problems. It's Rooney going to Derby, and especially he started there as a player. He's someone that the players at that level you'd have thought would look up to. I mean, would that work with top level players in the Premier League if he doesn't really know what he's doing as a coach? It's hard to say. I mean, I'm always skeptical of the sort of big name player becoming a manager. And to be fair, Rooney and Gerrard have done well and shown that there is something there. But I always think of the story of when Bobby Charlton had a go at management at Preston in the 70s. He was trying to teach them genuinely trying to teach second division players the technique for hitting the crossbar from the halfway line. And, these were humdrum second division English footballers who must just thinking, who is this that has just suddenly turned, this God who has turned up to tell us how to do this? It's just very odd. And I'd let Rooney, I think he should just try and see out what he started at Derby. If they stay up, that's a big tick. If they go down, it's not his fault. And ideally, like with Lampard, he did okay at Derby. He had resources, which Rooney doesn't have. But that was a big leap to go to Chelsea. It needed something in the middle, somebody like, I don't know, Crystal Palace or West Brom or something like that as the next step. And I think Rooney's the same, but I think once the drums start beating for a big name player to go to a particularly one of their old clubs, then I think it's hard to stop.
I'm half tempted to throw a wild one out here, but he plays some of the most attacking football in the world at the moment. He has success in Australia, Japan, and he's going quite well in Scotland right now with Celtic, and it's Ange Postecoglou.
Yeah. I don't think that would be popular with Everton fans. I think the idea of a manager coming down from Scotland wouldn't particularly fit with them. And that's something else they've actually tried in the past. And they've tried everything and nothing's worked. So, he sounds like a good manager. Again, I think just finish what he started at Celtic. I think, to try and get back to first in Scotland, because Celtic were, a long way second best last season, and they're still some way behind Rangers. So, again, I think he's one who will come to the Premier League at some point, but I think finish what's started in Scotland first.
The one positive, I think, I'm trying to pull up the Celtic or the Scottish ladder at the moment. The one positive that he would have, I think, is that he has that previous working relationship with Cahill, having been the Socceroos coach. And with that, it gives at least that sort of knowledge as to, okay, here's how I know he wants to play. Here's how I know how Cahill could affect these boys. They both know the sort of attacking football that Postecoglou plays, for better or for worse. And so it would be a good combination. But like you said, the issue is, is Everton going to be really going to want someone coming out from Scotland?
Yeah.
But we'll see. They're only 4 points behind Rangers at the moment, so it's a shot.
Yeah. Looking forward to the Old Firm derby actually when it comes.
Oh yeah, we'll be staying up late for that one down under. That's for sure. Speaking, we spoke about Everton, the injuries they've had. We've had a lot of Premier League postponements over the last few weeks. Some of them COVID related, which no worries, fine, fair enough. But for the first time, I think in history, we've seen Premier League postponements because squads don't have enough players due to a mixture of injuries, COVID, and AFCON players being out. Arsenal, as a club, came out earlier, this week, late last week, and basically said, stuff this is wrong. If you don't have the squad for it, the likes of really your top six clubs, because they're the ones who can afford to have these big, massive squads. If you don't have the squads for it, call up the academy players. You should be able to field 11 plus a bench if you've got a squad of 30 odd. Is it justified?
I think at the beginning, when they brought this in for COVID in December, when I think they always do weekly tests several times a week of Premier League players and coaches, and they suddenly went from having 2 or 3 to 180 in a week. So it was a problem. Some teams, had to close down their training bases and things like that, which kind of means you can't prepare for a game, which is why this was brought in. But I think people are getting increasingly sick of it. The numbers are going down among players, and this Arsenal have got borne the brunt of this, and it's not so much them. It was just that they were the final straw. They played, if you remember, the League Cup semi-final on Thursday night. Friday night, I think it was, they announced they wanted to postpone the North London derby, which is obviously a signature game on the calendar anyway, because they had 1 COVID case or 2. I've heard in some regions, but no more than 2. So how you could 2 players being out with COVID between Thursday and Friday means you can't suddenly play a game. Just smacked of, we just don't want to play this game with a weakened squad. Arteta has kind of tried to defend that this week, saying, well, we played games earlier in the season when we were missing players and we picked youngsters and we got slaughtered for it. Well, nobody was suggesting you don't play the game instead. So, Burnley have been doing it a lot as well. Sean Dyche said the other day he has 10 players for what was going to be a Monday night game this week or Tuesday night. And I thought, well, is that 10 first-team players or is that 10 players and all the under-23s have had to go home with COVID or injury or whatever? So it just feels like it's got out of hand. Yes, there have been extreme circumstances, and that's when you can apply for this. But the rule the Premier League have is very vague. It's also, that's just a sort of what you put on the application. They just make a case by case assessment, and it's gotten silly. I mean, Arsenal are playing tonight, so they suddenly found a few players from somewhere. They also loaned 2 players out right before they made this application to have a game postponed, which is again just smacks of bad planning, and it's your own fault. So I think they need to change this. I mean, as I said, if you have to close your training base, which I know Tottenham had that, Leeds did, and I think Watford and a couple of others, then fair enough, because you've got 7, 8 players missing with COVID. You can't do much about that. You can't plan for that. And you can't even prepare your team on a training pitch because it's closed. That's one thing. One COVID case, let's get a postponement, is just something else. And it's just gaming the system is the feeling that I think you get from this.
At what point, considering that AFCON goes on for another 2 weeks, I think it is, with COVID running rampant, UK near enough to record cases still, from my understanding, at what point do you, one, bubble up and say, right, we're just, we're all together for a month just to try and knock it out of the park, or 2, postpone until that? Do you think about postponing the Premier League 2 weeks?
The cases have started to go down. I mean, they really peaked just before New Year, so it was kind of understandable then. I think now it's going down. If that continues, and that's a big if that continues, I would just push on. I think if the cases start to go up again, I would just say maybe just have this circuit break of 2 weeks, especially if the country goes into lockdown, which they aren't at the minute, but might. Because at the minute they're just doing it case by one team can and another team can't, and there are teams who've played 22 games, and I think Burnley have played 17, so that's 5 games. I've never seen a team have 5 games in hand before. And if they just keep doing this case by case thing, rather than we all stop for a few weeks, or we go into isolation bubbles, which, like you were saying, or we just continue regardless and we don't have postponements, you've got to do one or the other, because doing what they're doing, we don't have to worry anymore about what happens when next season breaks just before Christmas for the World Cup, because we'll still be playing this season. I mean, so that's how ridiculous it's got. So yeah, they just really need. They are saying they're thinking of amending this rule, but the Premier League starts tomorrow night again, so they need to amend that pretty quick. And Arsenal, Burnley, who called all the postponements this week, guess what? They play each other this weekend. So
is that when you just pull up the under-16s and say, right, this is Premier League points, boys, off you go?
Yeah, I mean an average Premier League club has about 40 players. I mean, that varies from club to club, but if you include the under-23s, the under-18s, there are limits to what I think is reasonable to say is a player you can put in the first team. But your Premier League reserve teams are not terrible, and you've got plenty of good, youth team internationals from various countries. So just throwing a few of them in for a few weeks, I know it can dampen the spectacle, but we've got to think about this season needs to end at some point, and the way we're going, we're still going to be playing it in August.
Well, and you look at it, the Premier League always, game 38, match day 38 is always same.
May sometime.
May, I think it was May 8th last year, I think it was, something like that, somewhere around that. Yeah. 10 games, 3 o'clock kickoff. Assuming that they want the exact same thing, they've got to figure out where, keeping in account they have League Cup final to play, FA Cup,
and Europe.
And Europe.
Yeah.
How's Burnley going to make up 5 games and all that?
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that's been pointed out with this is that under their rules, you have to have 13 players who have played a Premier League game in the last 2 years. So if you've got an 18-year-old who made a 10-minute appearance last season, that counts as an eligible player under these guidelines that they've set up. So if you actually do it correctly and just blood some more kids, then they suddenly start counting as eligible players. So you disadvantage yourself more by playing that way. And Arsenal, and I don't want to sound like I'm picking on Arsenal, but they're out of the cup. They've just got one, maximum two Carabao Cup fixtures to think about. No European football. They're going for top four alongside West Ham, who are in the Europa, plus the FA Cup. Tottenham, who are still in the FA Cup. Man U, who are in the FA Cup and the Champions League. They're getting a distinct advantage with these postponements if they keep having them, because they can easily fit them in and other teams can't. So it is starting to create an uneven playing field. And the other thing to say, just, I mean, in a different league, I watched Bayern Munich a few weeks ago play. They're not allowed to have any fans in the stadiums right now in Germany. They had 9 kids on the bench who had not played a game between them. Snow was pouring down on the Allianz Arena. They still played and they didn't complain about it. And so Bayern can do it, then, these other big English clubs can certainly do it as well.
But can Bayern do it a cold, wet Tuesday night in Stoke? That is the main question.
Yeah. I've been to cold Tuesday nights in Stoke, and I wouldn't want to be there again.
Well, also these boys more, a couple of times in the last few years, but they're back in the Premier League, and after a very shaky start, they've won their last 2 of Leeds. They're 7 points outside of the relegation zone. They've given themselves a bit of a buffer. They beat West Ham, as we mentioned, to European Champions League hopes. I think it was. They're slowly and surely starting to climb up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was always going to be more difficult for Leeds' second year. It always is, because when a team comes up, no matter how good or bad you are, teams aren't really sure how that player is going to work in the Premier League, and is this going to be a bridge too far for these players and this coach? And that will happen to Brentford next year, because they're not going to go anywhere, but next year they'll find it a bit harder. So it was always going to be tougher, but they've had so many injuries. This year, their core quartet of Llorente in defence, Phillips in midfield, Rafinha out wide, and Bamford up front. I think they've only had those 4 on the pitch at the same time once for 90 minutes all season. Bamford hasn't played a game or hasn't started a game since early September, and he was top scorer last year. So it has been a lot of mix and match and players having to play out of position. And suddenly I never thought that they'd go down, but they've suddenly found a bit of what they had last year. They've scored 6 goals in the last 2 games, and that's been a big problem for them this year. Without Bamford, they haven't really had a striker, and that's that. And just what Bamford gives them as well, creating chances with his hold-up play, and he's quite creative as well. So they missed him in all sorts of the whole package he brings to them. And now suddenly they're playing well. I mean, talking about the COVID situation, they actually had down to the bare bones against West Ham, and 2 players went off injured after 20 minutes. So they had to put 2 kids on for their Premier League debut, and they still won away at West Ham. So I mean, they've got a lot of praise this week for that, because they've actually played within the spirit of the rules, I suppose, on COVID. And after some really poor performances before Christmas, when it looked to be all going wrong, it's suddenly buoyant again, and I think they'll stay up fine. For Leeds, it's just where exactly they get to this season. Yeah,
they the 2 youngsters, Lewis Bates, 19, haven't played in the Premier League before. And Leo, I'm going to butcher this one.
Hjelde.
There you go. Leo Hjelde had Norwegian under 21s, just graduated into the U21s this year, actually, was U19s previously, had been on the bench for probably half of Leeds games this year, hadn't made an appearance until the FA Cup, came on for his Premier League debut, 3-2 off the back of a Harrison hat-trick.
Yeah. One thing Leeds have been very good at that doesn't tend to get a lot of publicity is they have been very active in recruiting players to their under-23s. It's not just kids from their academy. Hjelde came from Celtic. Bate they signed this summer from Chelsea for $1.5 million, and he's in the England under 19s, I think, and is doing well with them. So they're part of their strategy in the Premier League is let's take young players, give them a chance of playing in the first team, which obviously is very hard with clubs like Chelsea and City, and have a good under 23s policy, and we can use some of those players through the season. They've actually set a Premier League record for teenage debuts this season. They've had 8, and not all of them are going to work. We know that, but those 2, Joe Gelhardt, the young striker who came in again, they bought him from Wigan, had him in the under 23s last year. Now, one of those players, a little bit being compared a lot to the young Wayne Rooney, in that he's one of these players who he gets the ball around the edge of the box, and he's going to do something. He's just strong, low center of gravity. He just piles past defenders. He can shoot as well. So they've got players there who are going to be. Some of them are going to be, I think, internationals. Certainly going to be good Premier League players. So there's kind of a blooding them this season will pay a dividend in years to come. And I think for Leeds, the big thing is you've got to stay up for 2 years. And they've alluded to this, even the directors in their programme notes and things. They said once you've been in 2 years, you feel like you belong in the Premier League. You know that money's coming every year. You're no longer that yo-yo club like West Brom or Fulham or Norwich. And then you're more confident about actually being ambitious. Their Leeds are probably going to get bought by. There's an option for the San Francisco 49ers to buy Leeds United, not Leeds the City, by January 2024 for something like £400 million. So clearly they're thinking to the future. I mean, if they can stay up, this all looks very good. Drop out and you become that yo-yo club working on, the parachute payments between the Championship and the Premier League. Then that you really have to avoid that. So, it's been a tough season for Leeds, but as long as they survive it, I don't think they'll care.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the bench they had now for that 3-2 West Ham game. They had Rodrigo, who was first game back after 5 games off, played 26 minutes, took Bate off. The oldest one outside of that I can see, I think was McKinstry.
Yeah,
McKinstry is 19.
They were all academy players, and
Archie Gray, 15 years old, on the bench in a Premier League game.
Yeah, Archie Gray. We should also mention he's still waiting for his debut, but he is the grandson of Eddie Gray, I think, Leeds legend, and great. His great uncle was Frank Gray, a Leeds legend, and his father, Andy Gray, was also played for Leeds in the 90s. So, everyone's kind of waiting for him to get his debut. But
he's got time.
I think everyone would rather it was next season now, and some of the veterans came back.
At the very least, the kid is 15.
Yeah.
So, I mean, read into that what you will. But if COVID aside, that's still a 15-year-old on the bench in a Premier League game. But you go from 15 to mid-30s.
Yeah, old enough.
Robert Lewandowski, the FIFA Player of the Year.
Yeah.
I mean, second year in a row, not overly surprising. Should have had the Ballon d'Or. But, it is what it is in that regard. A couple of weird kind of votes. Neymar was voted as the top player by Lionel Messi, who himself, despite missing about 7 months of the year, was in probably about four of the players' top 3s. And Jorginho, I think, ended up polling second overall.
Yeah, you don't really know with this what they're. I mean, I know with this award, it's players voting, like you're saying. So does that mean they vote for their mates or they vote for what they think? It's all a bit. Awards in football are like the Oscars. It's just kind of what's fashionable to like. You feel that year, and so I'll vote for that. From the people who get a vote, it's strange. I mean, there's no perfect way of doing it. I mean, the Ballon d'Or, I think, is journalist voting. So, I mean, obviously, a journalist in Buenos Aires is going to vote for Messi, or anywhere in South America, they're not going to vote for Robert Lewandowski. I mean, come on. I mean, it's not going to happen. But if you ask fans to do it, they're just going to pick players from their team, from their national teams, and from their clubs. So, yeah, I mean, I think Lewandowski definitely deserves it. I really hope he gets next year's Ballon d'Or somehow, or this year's Ballon d'Or, I should say, because it's ridiculous. He's never won it, and the last couple of years he's had have been phenomenal. He's 60 goals in a calendar year. I mean, all right, that's with Bayern. Bayern are very good and they dominate the Bundesliga, but he just seems to be a player that's getting better with age, which is strange because we're seeing clear signs that Ronaldo and Messi are not quite what they were a few years ago, and this guy's not that much younger, and he just seems to get better. He's better now than he was at 25, 26 when I first saw him. So yeah, I think they got the right decision, but they have strange ways of getting there.
Yeah, trying to I did see the voting. Yeah, he's 33.
Yeah,
which is wild to think.
Yeah, and he still plays for Poland as well, and he didn't get a lot of headlines this summer, Lewandowski, because he was in a pretty bad Poland team, but he was really almost dragged them into the knockout phase. He scored about nearly all their goals he created. He pulled people with him. Yeah, he really did everything one player could do to get a bad team into the next round, and came up a little bit short. But yeah, I mean, he's also going to be in the World Cup. The playoffs are just around the corner, I think, in March, and Messi's going to be at this World Cup, but we know Ronaldo might not be. Lewandowski or Zlatan, one of those two is not going to be because they're in the same playoff path. So, yeah, I really want to see Lewandowski get the Ballon d'Or at some point.
I mean, next year's his best year, isn't it? Ronaldo's not playing great football at United. Messi's more injured than not. Who else? Jorginho, yeah, maybe. Neymar's not playing his best football, and Mbappe's not playing his best football. Haaland?
Yeah, he's one, but one that's didn't even get in the FIFA Pro 11 for this year. Incredibly, was Mo Salah, and I don't understand how he didn't get in that.
Wasn't he named Striker of the Year as well, or Attacker of the Year, or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I think for this year, I always think in World Cup years, I'm not sure if they're doing, because it's a Winter World Cup, if they're doing the Ballon d'Or before or after. And my suspicion is it'll be just after that they start doing the voting. And it's whoever is the best player for the team that wins it will probably get it and be seen, because that's kind of how these things tend to work, even though they shouldn't. But when you have a tournament, and particularly if it's a World Cup, it's usually the best player in the World Cup wins that year's Ballon d'Or. So, yeah, it could be Rafinha.
Oh, stop it. Yeah. No, Jono. Bad.
But that would mean he'd be at Bayern by January. So, yeah, maybe that's best he doesn't do that.
Maybe it's Harry Kane. Maybe Harry Kane will win it.
Yeah, maybe on last night, maybe Steven Bergwijn after his 2 goals in the 95th minute. Wow.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. What was it? A yellow card in the 89th, a goal in 95th and the 97th.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. I saw one. I was only half watching it because I thought, I had other things to do, and I didn't get to see all the second half. And I just saw a tweet. How on earth are Leicester winning this? I thought, Leicester won that. Oh, right. And just as the 3rd goal went in, I thought, wow, I've never seen that happen before. I've seen late goals, injury time goals, but yeah, not that late for 2 goals.
No, that's Fergie time late. That sort of action. Yeah. But before we go, because this is definitely the longest episode we've done, no complaints here. Liverpool Arsenal, second leg of the EFL Cup tonight. Predictions?
It's at Arsenal, but I still fancy Liverpool, even though Arsenal did really well in the first leg. It's you wonder how all this negative publicity Arsenal have had in the last week has affected them, and whether they really come out fighting. They did really well first leg. They've given themselves a chance, but even with a few players, Mane and Salah missing, I still think Liverpool will find a way. And Klopp's only been to one domestic cup final in England, surprisingly, and has never won one. So this you just feel Liverpool will get over the line.
You have a score prediction, or are you
I think it'll be 1-0. I don't think I think Liverpool will try and keep it tight, and I suspect Jota will get it if he's playing. I think Liverpool will just. Now Arsenal have to really come out at home. I think that maybe plays to Liverpool's strengths because they can hit you so quickly with the players that they've got, even with Salah and Mane missing.
Yeah, I mean, you still have the likes of Bobby Firmino. He can just jump straight in there. He started for them last game. Jota on the wing, got Henderson, Fabinho, and Milner in the middle there, and a full strength back four.
Yeah, I don't see Arsenal just being able to break Liverpool down, which is, I think, will be the difference. And it's Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, ex-Arsenal player, in form. Yeah, maybe he gets the winner.
I could see it. I'll go 2-0 Liverpool here. I reckon I'm with you on Jota. I don't know. I'm looking at last week's team list, and for whatever reason, Henderson is standing out. So I'll say Henderson scores as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Chelsea-Liverpool final, if we get that, will be a good final as well. That's hard to call. And obviously, with City running away from the league, it's a chance for one of those two teams just behind them to win something worth having. So, I would really like to see that final. So,
yeah, who knows?
And I live in North London, so I couldn't stand Arsenal being in another cup final.
Hopefully not. But we'll know in about 7 hours time. They kick off at 6:45 my time, which is quarter to 8 your time.
Quarter to 8, I think it is local time.
Yeah. So we'll find out soon enough. But that is episode 6 of the False Nine done and dusted. Hopefully Tyler's with us again next week. But he's Jono. I'm Luke. We will catch you for episode 7 at this time next week.